Good day and welcome to the Odyssey, Navigating the Early Career Clinician-Researcher Waters. This is a podcast made by and for early career researchers in the clinical setting. So join us as we delve into the journey of two poor souls paving their way in medicine and research. Welcome to the Odyssey. I'm Simon Couillard, based in Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada.
And I'm Sanjay Ramakrishnan. I'm a respirologist based in Perth, Western Australia.
Thank you for being with me, Sanjay, on this never-ending adventure of realizing everything we know and everything we've learned so rapidly. Today, we're going to talk about balancing the clinic. So obviously, as clinical researchers, there's the big word clinical in front of research. So we're going to talk about that. And maybe, Sanjay, you can help us to just remember what parts of the first episode were pertinent to this episode and how we can build from there.
Yeah, thank you, Simo. I think we spoke a lot about negotiations in the last episode and why it's so important, because time is everything when you're a researcher, and you will only get that opportunity at the start to negotiate. What offer you get at the start of your contract, at the start of your career, will be probably the best offer you will get for that location. So it's really important that you focus on that point when you start somewhere.
So we talked last time, I think, as well about that negotiation terms. In negotiation terms, aiming for at very least 50% of your time for research, if that's possible. And you're right that the start is so important. I just want to share my part of experience that I realized after 1 year and a half that 50% of time is actually not that much, because what it ends up being, I don't know what your experience was, but what it ends up being is 50% of your work weeks are clinic. And then you have to remove the vacations and the 2 or 3 international congresses per year and these meetings that you have for other, grant reviewing panels. And it ends up being more like 25 or 30% of time for research. Was that your experience as well? Or is that your experience as well, Sanjay?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you do the clinical accounting, they'll say, you saw this many patients in this many sessions. So this is your time. You're doing mentoring trainees, you're doing teaching, you're doing grant reviewing, you're doing performance review, doing morbidity and mortality meetings. All that takes time. It's none of that's accounted for. So it's very easy to think, I've got 2.5 days a week out of my 5 days. I have loads of time. It really quickly gets sucked into the clinic. Never stops. Right? It can expand into any empty space. So it's very important to also to quarantine and keep it separate.
Yes. And so I was lucky because after 2 years of being in my position, I renegotiated, and that's difficult, as you mentioned. But my head of department was very understanding, and I moved to 70% time research. And actually, in my mind, it still ends up being 50% clinic. But actually, at least the congresses and the vacations are no longer included in my research time that much, because they're actually the 20% of excess that I remove from clinic. So that's my main part. And how about I guess the main I remember, I don't know, you just arrived earlier than me, but when I came back, I was amazed by how much free time I had. You just arrive and you're supposed to be super busy, and then you realize, well, my clinics are empty. How did you set up your clinic, and what would be your top tips, Sanjay, to fill out that clinical time?
Yeah, and I agree with you. It feels like you have all this time in the world, and you just finished this, postdoc or PhD, and you're really, really busy, and suddenly you have all this time, and oh my God, what am I doing? Am I a fraud? But don't let
feeling
that get to you.
I didn't get that feeling yet.
Don't let that get to you. You will never be that good ever again. And one tip that both of our mentors, Ian Paver, gave me when I left was, don't inherit a clinic if at all possible. Don't inherit someone else's patients. Don't inherit someone else's long-term issues or the model of care they were delivering or the expectations the patient had. Whatever you do, the patient stuck with that particular physician because they like that particular physician. So you will never be as good in their minds, or will never meet expectations as the relationship they had with that previous clinician. So if you can at all avoid it, I think you should avoid inheriting a clinic. So setting up your own clinic is always, in my view, better. Then you can set expectations with patients for your clerical staff, your nursing staff, your time management, how much time people are sitting in the waiting room. All that is different. So I really think that was very sage advice. Trying not to inherit a clinic is vital.
And I guess the flip side is also you don't want to inherit 100% workload, right? Because unless you're inheriting from another academic, you're going to inherit a large list that'll take a lot of time. But I guess there might be other aspects here at play when you talk about not inheriting in a patient clinic. It's, I guess, you don't, especially don't inherit drama or difficult cases. I did inherit some patients, but actually it was triaged patients by my colleague, and it was dispatched to different my retiring colleague, and it was dispatched to different people. And in the end, at least it was diluted. So certainly, I did not inherit the full workload, and I completely agree with you that that would be to avoid. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is most of your health services, which wherever you are, will prefer new patients to follow up patients, financially speaking. And you have this opportunity now to see lots more new people. So there's a really clear reason for you to start out just seeing more new patients with the limit. And I think, you can see too many patients. Again, going back to the early point, it's very tempting when you have all this time to just see lots and lots of patients. You're very comfortable doing it. You're confident clinicians. So it's very easy to be really comfortable in the clinic and just see lots of patients. So it's important to have new patients, but just have a cap on it. So you're not just filling up all your clinic with news and then you have to deal with all the follow-up.
That reminds me of an anecdote, Sanjay, because so you're right that new patients in Canada as well, by the way, are paid 4 times the price for my own personal pocket than old patients. And actually, the hospital metrics are based on wait list and new patients being seen. So you're completely right. The anecdote I want to say is I was setting up my clinic and I had started saying, well, okay, so I have 50% time protected. So those clinics I'll fill up. I'll fill up that clinical time with new patients. And I was so lucky because my mentors and my mentor and a very friendly colleague, they actually locked the door and entered in my clinical office and then closed the door behind them and said, look, Simon, we just saw you put a full list of new patients. No one expects you to put new patients. You're here to do research. You're here to do research patients and find new interesting patients. And this new general patient clinic with, I do asthma. So, silicosis and unexplained pleural effusions is not something that you want to be tied down with. And we discourage you from having a new patient list of general clinic. Do focus on the new asthma patients. And, you'll thank us in the future because you cannot come back from this point. Because I don't know you in Australia, but it's nearly a lifelong relationship when you take a new patient. So this caseload will be built up anyways.
Yeah, I know those corridor consults will keep coming. Oh, remember that person you saw in the clinic, in 10 years ago, 5 years ago? It's like, no, I don't remember them, but people will get stuck with that patient, right? Forever and ever. Every other consultant in the hospital will assume that you're sorting out all their respiratory problems or whatever specialty that you're in. So yeah, no, absolutely right. And you just following on from what Simon said, it's important to let the clinic help you research. You want the kind of patients, the patient advocates. I found that's a really important point. If you really streamline your clinic, you can start picking up your patient representative, consumer representative groups. That's where they're going to come from. But if they're too spread out, then they're less likely to be able to form your, consumer reference groups, your patient involvement committees, your steering committees for trials from those patients, because you're going to see few of that particular problem. So you want that clinic to help you.
Yeah, so I think you're right. Differentiate the useful versus the non-useful clinical time. So the useful time is building your specialty clinic in your field of interest. And the non-useful time is taking care of your, general practice obligations, for example, on-call, ward time, consults, unless, of course, your research is heavily consult general practice, which is unusual. But if that's possible, then good for you. So maybe we can finish this section of our podcast I'd like to just share my clinical schedule, and then maybe you can share yours, Sanjay. So I have a 30% workload. So I do 30% of heavy tasks, such as consultations, ward work, the 30% of what my colleagues, my full-time clinicians do. So that means I have 3 on-call weeks per year, which is not much, which I'm very happy for, plus 3 or 4 weeks of consults. And then I have 1 or 2 weeks of light work, for example, physiology interpretation and stuff that I can do in an afternoon during the week. I have all the other weeks, I have a full day of asthma clinic. So that's where my fellows, my students, me, we're all my research staff, we all work, and I think, Sanjay, you have maybe the same model as me, where my research staff works with me in clinic. So they help me identify patients and they have my vision. And then I have a general practice clinic, because obviously when I do ward work, I do see pneumonias and pleural effusions or cancers that I need to follow up on. So I have a general practice clinic afternoon every 3 weeks. I am now 3 years into my practice, and already that's growing, and I had to extend that by an hour. So that just tells you the general work will creep in whatever you do. So that's my schedule. How about you, Sanjay? Do you want to share your schedule for people?
So thank you. Yeah, so for me, my clinic, luckily, the way the department is set up for me is there's very clear divisions based on subspecialty. So even if I look after a person with interstitial lung disease in the ward, I don't have to follow them up. I can send them back to the interstitial lung disease specialist clinic, because they also want to fill it up with that particular flavor of patient. So I don't need a general clinic so much. I do COPD, which is a lot of general. So I guess that helps. So my week, 5 days a week, 1 day of the week is completely clinic, like what you said, Simon. And again, I think that's really helpful. It technically is 1.5 days worth of work because you have administrative time. So, but I squeeze it all into 1 day so that clears up my other days from clinical work scooping in. So all of Wednesday for me is the clinic day, all day clinic. So I would see, 16, 17 patients that day, but it frees up my other days. And I do 5 weeks of ward work and 5 weeks of consult. So, it spreads out to be about 30, 35% of my entire year is spent in the clinical work. Yeah.
And Sanjay, I often heard and obviously when we were in Oxford, that was what was being done. I heard the general wisdom of making your research clinic on Mondays. And I'm told many researchers do that. I was not able. It's a Tuesday. Because, and among other things, Mondays are usually those that go to holidays and all that. So you get missed clinics. How about you? How do you feel about a Monday research clinic or a clinic?
To be honest, it hasn't really impacted me. I actually really like my Mondays because the weekend I'm rested, and the Monday is like grant writing, writing day. Actually, you're fresh, focus on the difficult tasks at the start of the week. And I think clinic on a hump day for me works really well because I've had 2 days of academic time, have a clinic day, which is a break, right? You are more comfortable. You've done it for much longer as a early career researcher. You're a lot more confident in the clinic than you are, at least for me, managing my academic time. So it's more predictable.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm happy with my Tuesdays as well. And actually, I envy you with the Wednesdays. I feel that cutting the week in two would be great. The one thing I will say is when you have meetings with international collaborators and all that, often you realize they're all off the 1 day for clinics. So we have some, but we always end up finding a schedule, don't we? Send it like this, like now. We worked out and we're like 12 hours apart. So, okay. So the next chapter of this podcast on clinical activities is also the relationships, because one of my, someone in my family told me, nothing's more complicated in life than human relationships. So, I mean, AI is great because you don't have any human relationship, and AI will always say yes. But we work with humans.
You are right, Simon. You are the best.
Yeah. The AI will be very nice as well. So we work with humans, obviously, and our nearest humans as a specialist are other specialists of our field in our division, and clinicians are busy people, as are we. But I think I was going to ask your wisdom, Sanjay, of how you work with them relationship-wise to make sure that everything goes smoothly and it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I agree completely. This is human. Working with any department, especially academic departments, they're normally large departments, and you're different. You're a new person. You have new ideas. You are going to step on people's feet. It's unavoidable. It's about how to be as gentle as possible while doing that. You have shared clinical staff. It's very unlikely that a nurse or respiratory scientist or a respiratory therapist will be working just for you in your clinic. They'll be working across different clinics. Otherwise, they just don't have enough salary. So how do you minimize conflicts with the other doctors, other clinicians, to make sure that the staff don't feel like they have to divide their loyalties? And how do you build your requirements into their workday? And how do you make it possible So it is worthwhile being mindful. Yes, you are being employed to run this super specialized program that's very exciting, but someone else was doing that before you got there. They had to do it because the patients were there. So what are you doing to support that previous person while you quietly take the patients that you want, but also help them in things that they may not want, and figure out a way to scratch each other's back. So it's really useful to think about it, talk about it, really be open, have coffee dates. I had lots and lots of scheduled coffees with my closest, person and the closest to my niche. So it's worthwhile being really open and not let anything fester, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think you talk about the closest person there. Well, maybe we can touch about the buddy system afterwards. But for general clinicians, I think we all work in academic institutions, right? So that means there are clinicians that are actually stressed with not doing enough research. And by including them in recruitment, for example, or including them in some student projects which are less intense, sometimes the clinicians can get something out of it and be very happy to have ticked that box with you, and you can assume a help and foster a favorable academic environment. But you're right that clinicians are so amazing people that and work so hard. We need to make sure we don't take away their expertise, which is actually in many cases much better than ours. And how do you feel exactly about that topic? So I sometimes feel that as a researcher, I may have less expertise than my colleagues. And how do you juggle that? I guess an imposter syndrome once again, or when we're plagued by this imposter syndrome.
Yeah, classic academics. I think knowing your limits, your practice limits. So, for example, me, yes, I recognize my expertise in COPD, in chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. There's many different other parts of respirology. So, yes, I have the clinical training, but I'm not going to be the best person in the hospital to manage that. And be really open with your colleagues and ask them, hey, I got this person. This is what I think I want to do. What do you think? And just be humble and be open to suggestions, even if you might disagree. That's okay. Listen, and that just give everyone around you, not just for show, a genuine way to contribute to your thinking. So I think knowing your limits, consult each other, build a collaborative environment, and it's particularly important for competitors in your space. Your niche might overlap a little bit. Simon and I worked really hard to make sure that didn't happen in the institution that we went to, but it might happen in your institution. And try and work with them, try and build ways, joint meetings with idea sessions or journal club or something, to try and build a respectful and collaborative environment. I think sounds wishy-washy, but just being humble and open and with open ears, I think is really important.
Okay, I have a lot to say on this because I feel that you just touched on different things that I wanted to say, and I was thinking for our listeners. One clinician I asked, how can I be a good researcher clinician to work with you? And he said, don't be one of these God researchers. So and I guess in academia, we publish a lot and we're very proud of our science. And I think sometimes maybe the reputation we get is we go along and be slightly over our head on how much we know. I personally call my colleagues very often when I'm on the wards and say, look, this is a sleep medicine patient. How would you do this? I want to make sure that he gets the best care, and I'm not sure that that's my area of expertise. And what happens is the reverse happens. So people will call me to say, hey, this is an asthma patient. Should I refer him to you? What do you want me to do before I refer him? Is he good for research? So that's good. The second thing is,
great point.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you just boosted your recruitment for files. Yeah, it's perfect, right? It works out. Yeah.
Yeah. We're devils in the background, of course, thinking about our research. And the second aspect was a buddy system. So you talked about working with competitors. I don't want to call it a competitor, but I have a colleague who's, I'll call him Dr. Philippe Lachapelle. He's an amazing clinician and also very avid academic minded person. Isn't a full-time researcher, isn't allowed, for example, to ask for public grants and all that. He doesn't have enough research time. But when we work in our clinic together, so we actually share patients, we have a common vision. Our team discussions after the clinic are together, and we really think alike, which is helpful. And I make sure that he's on my papers, our papers, I should say, because he recruits patients with me, and actually I float ideas with him. So it's an idea bouncing around ideas with a like-minded clinician is great. We supervise students as well. So, I mean, to say things quite frankly, this is very good for not only his academic promotion, but also from a financial perspective. It's also interesting because supervising students does give financial incentives in my university. The students themselves are super happy because they have a really good clinician to whom to speak with. And the last part was something my mentor told me is when I'm at a congress or when I'm outside, there is still someone recruiting patients, seeing trial patients, taking care of the research. And that is something I want to foster. And I make sure that my colleague, he's happy with our system. I often check with him to say, is this all right? Can I give more back to you? And he's super happy, I think. So the buddy system is super important. I don't know how you feel about that, Sanjay. Were you able to find a buddy yet? Or
Amazing. I'm very lucky, same as you, Dr. Christopher Koski, if I can name drop him, senior clinician, really passionate about the patients with COPD. And, our clinics run alongside each other. We're literally like across the corridor, and we routinely stop the clinic halfway, have a cup of tea and talk about a patient or talk about a research idea. The nurses always come in like, hey, you got patients to see, go back to your clinic rooms. And it's, you have to, and, he's a top recruiter. He's the nicest man in the world. He's Mr. Congeniality, so he can recruit any patient for any trial. So, it's really vital that you build a team with clinical experts. The people you're working with are experts. You need to use that expertise.
Yeah, and we generate a lot of ideas with those extra coffees and as you said, have a lot of fun together. I think that's what you're saying as well. You have a lot of fun with this clinician. So I think we're at time. So do you want to make some concluding statements, Sanjay? And then I'll tell our listeners what's up in the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. So just finish up. I think the clinic is not your enemy. It is that you can make it help you. You can design it to help your week, your workload, the kind of patients you want to see, the patient experts you want to get to. They all come from your clinic. And, primary care colleagues want to be able to refer to your expert clinic. So, it is a really valuable resource. Be creative. Let the clinic, contribute to your research. So use the infrastructure, use the staff time, use the administrative time. Try and make it merge as much as you can. And it doesn't have to be this or that. Can let it overlap and just try and protect your research time.
Great conclusion. So I don't think I have anything to add on that. I'd like to thank you, Sanjay, again. So we have a great time. It's good to catch up together on these talks.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much for having me.
And on the next episode, I'll give Sanjay a little break, and we'll have Imran Satya from McMaster University. He's a budget wizard, and he'll help us balance the budget or juggle the budget, I will say, which for me is really my weak spot. So I'm very happy to have someone who's able to help me understand how to make a budget to work for research. So that's for our next episode.
I'll be your number one listener.
Yeah. Thank you, Sanjay. But we'll also, I think we have an idea to get a guest who published a recent paper on startup packages for young investigators, which you and me will interview in the near future as well. So
yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to that.
Much to come. All right. So thank you for joining us on the Odyssey podcast, and have a great day.